The court said, and the government may call its next witness.
Mr. Ferguson said, the government calls Kimberly Espinoza.
The law clerk said, please raise your right hand.
Witness sworn.
The law clerk said, please speak directly into the microphone and hold it close to you, and you may be seated.
The court said, state your name and spell it.
The witness said, I'm sorry, name and what?
The court said, state your name and spell it.
The witness said, Kimberly Espinoza, Kimberly Espinoza.
The court said, you may inquire.
Mr. Ferguson said, I'm sorry, Your Honor. May I just have one moment to talk with defense counsel?
The court said yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor, with apologies, may we have a very brief sidebar?
The court said yes.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor. We just noticed a few minutes before Mr. Ferguson stood up to speak that the stipulation that covers the bank records that this witness is going to put in there was a scrivener's error and we're short one document. So we just wanted to put on the record the defense will just stip to the coming in on the record even though it's not in the stip. We just wanted to do that before he started.
The court said that's fine.
Mr. Skirek said, so the defense stips to GXJPM 121.
Mr. Ferguson said, great. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
The court said okay.
Continued on next page. In open court, Kimberly Espinoza, called as a witness by the government, having been duly sworn, testified as follows. Direct examination. By Mr. Ferguson.
Good afternoon, Ms. Espinoza.
Good afternoon.
Where do you work?
At the FBI.
What's your position at the FBI?
I'm a forensic accountant.
And what are some of your duties or responsibilities as a forensic accountant at the FBI?
I review and analyze financial information, mostly bank records.
And how long have you been doing that work?
For 16 years.
Now, Ms. Espinoza, besides your testimony today and your preparation for that testimony, did you have any involvement in this case?
I did not.
In advance of your testimony, were you asked to review certain government exhibits and summarize the information in them?
Yes, I was.
Did you prepare or help prepare and review for accuracy some summary charts?
Yes, I did.
Are those charts based on voluminous records?
Yes, they are.
What type or types of exhibits are the charts based on?
Bank records.
Now, who decided which exhibits you reviewed and what information to include on the charts?
The prosecutors did.
Am I one of those prosecutors?
Yes.
Were you provided the opportunity to make revisions to the charts to make sure they were accurate?
Yes.
Did you make revisions to the charts?
I did.
And after you revised the charts, are they now all accurate?
Yes, they are.
And Ms. Espinoza, just to be clear, did you review all the evidence gathered in this case or just the charts and the exhibits those charts are based on?
Just the charts and exhibits that it's based on.
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor. At this time the government offers a stipulation agreed to between the parties that's marked as Government Exhibit Stip. STIP 14.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's Exhibit Stip 14 received in evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, and I'll just read the stipulation, at least part of it. It is hereby agreed between the parties that the below-listed exhibits were lawfully obtained by the government and are authentic records of the entity listed in column A that were made at or near the time by, or from information transmitted by, a person with knowledge of the matters set forth in the records. Such records were kept in the course of a regularly conducted activity. And it was the regular practice of that entity to make the records. And the government will offer actually, Ms. Loftus. If you want to scroll to page 5.
By Mr. Ferguson.
Ms. Espinoza, do you see under column A, there's an entry towards the middle? It says J.P. Morgan Chase Bank?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, and Ms. Loftus, if you want to scroll up to page 3. And at the top, in column A, Ms. Espinoza, do you see there's an entity named Citibank, in A?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. So the government will now offer government exhibits CIT-14 and CIT-47. The government also offers government exhibits JPM 118 through 121.
Mr. Skirek said, no objection.
The court said, they are admitted.
Government's exhibits CIT-14, CIT-47, JPM 118, JPM 121 received in evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, now, Ms. Loftus, if we could show just the witness now what's marked as Government Exhibit Z1.
By Mr. Ferguson.
Ms. Espinoza, what is this?
These are the exhibits that I reviewed and maintained.
These are the charts you helped review?
Yes.
Did you review all the exhibits that this chart is based on?
Yes.
And are these charts accurate?
Yes. Z1.
Mr. Ferguson said, government offers government exhibit.
Mr. Skirek said, no objection.
The court said, it is admitted.
Government's exhibit Z1 received in evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, could we please publish, Ms. Loftus?
By Mr. Ferguson.
Now, Ms. Espinoza, generally speaking, what do these charts show?
These charts show an analysis of mainly 2 bank accounts for Soroka Media Group. So it's going to show all the incoming money and all the outgoing money from those 2 accounts.
Now looking just at this first chart here, please explain what we're looking at on this slide.
This is one of the bank accounts that I reviewed. The account title is Soroka Media Group Incorporated D/B/A Himalaya dollar. It's a Chase account ending in 5601. And as of April 1, 2020. The beginning balance in the account was $206,133.
Now Soroka Media Group Incorporated, do you know what that is?
I do not.
It also has a name D/B/A Himalaya dollar. What's D/B/A?
Doing business as.
Do you know what Himalaya dollar is?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Now let's go to the next page, Ms. Loftus, please. Ms. Espinoza, could you read the title of this slide, please?
Chase 5601, Signature Cards. And they're dated July 24, 2018 and May 21, 2020.
Chase 5601, is that the same account on the first slide we looked at?
Yes, it is.
What's a signature card?
Signature card is a document provided by the bank. It gives all the account information. Like the account title, the number, when the account was opened, and then also the signer on the account.
What's an account signer?
It's the person who's authorized to use the bank account.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could zoom in on the left signature card first. All right. Now, Ms. Espinoza. Just focusing you first on the top left here, what's the account title?
Soroka Media Group Inc.
And beneath that, there's a business address, right?
Yes.
Now focusing you on the top right, it lists an account number. What are the last 4 listed there?
5,601.
And beneath that, a couple lines, it says date opened. What was the date this account was opened?
July 24, 2018.
And focusing you towards the bottom of what's blown up here, who is the signatory on this account?
Yanping Wang.
Do you know who that is?
I do not.
What was her title?
Acting Secretary.
And what's the date she signed this?
July 24, 2018.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Ms. Loftus, if we could zoom in on the right signature page. The one on the left was 2018, right? What's the date of the one on the right?
May 21, 2020.
Okay. Now focusing you again on the top left, what's the account title?
Soroka Media Group Incorporated D/B/A Himalaya dollar.
And focusing you on the right, what are the last four?
5,601.
So same account, there's now a D/B/O on the account title?
Yes.
All right. And again, on the signature page, who's the signatory on this account?
Yinping Wang.
What's her title?
President.
And what was the date she signed this?
May 21st, 2020.
So Ms. Espinoza, throughout this account for the exhibits you looked at, the authorized person was Yinping Wang.
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Let's go to the third page, Ms. Loftus. All right. Now are we just back at the first page that we had looked at originally?
Yes.
And on April 1st, 2020, what's the beginning balance in the Soroka 5601 account?
$206,133.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Let's go to the next slide, Ms. Loftus, please. Okay. Now Ms. Espinoza, please explain what we're looking at on this slide.
This is showing, for the same Soroka account, 5601, from April 1st, 2020, through April 30th, 2020, there are deposits totaling $32,543,535. And it consists of 291 deposit transactions. And they have references such as GTV, stock, investment, and capital.
There's some bracketed text at the bottom that says, including misspellings and similar text. What does that mean?
Some of the references or the memos had some misspellings. And then additional words added to the front or the back.
And I should have asked, when it says with references to, what do you mean by reference?
A lot of the transactions were wire transfers. And so a reference is similar to like a memo on a check, where the sender could put a reason for why they are sending the money.
Mr. Ferguson said, let's go to the next slide, please, Ms. Loftus. Ms. Espinoza, please explain what we're looking at on this slide.
These are 4 examples of those wire transfer deposits that I was just speaking about. So there's 2 of them that are occurring on April 24th, one on May 1st, and one on May 12th. And the amounts are to the right, 300,000, 200,000, etc. And then highlighted is the memos or references that I was just referring to. So the top one says GTV investment. The next one says investment share capital. The next one says attention to Mr. Miles Gua. And the last one says for GTV stock.
And are these all the reference lines or just some examples?
Just some examples.
Do you know what GTV is?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson said, let's go to the next slide, please, Ms. Loftus. Okay. Now what's shown on this slide now, Ms. Espinoza?
So this is the same Soroka account ending in 5601, so after those deposits, for that 1 month. On April 30th, the ending balance in the account is $32,474,168.
Mr. Ferguson said, and let's go to the next slide, Ms. Loftus. All right. Now what's shown here, Ms. Espinoza?
This is showing, for the same account, the Chase 5601, from May 1st, 2020, through May 29th, 2020, there were deposits totaling $291,554,689. It consisted of 2,446 deposit transactions, and again, there were references to GTV, stock, investment, private placement, capital.
Mr. Ferguson said, let's go to the next slide, please, Ms. Loftus. All right. So Ms. Espinoza, after those additional incoming deposits referencing things like stock or private placement, how much money is in the 5601 account now?
As of May 29, 2020, the ending balance is $313,213,772.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, please go to the next slide. How much money was in this account as of June 3, 2020?
$928,401.
And actually, I should ask, What was the balance on the account the day before that?
324,778,316.
So approximately how much money left this account on June 3rd?
About $323 to $324 million.
Okay. Let's look at those transactions. Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could go to the next slide, please. You could scroll up. Thank you. All right. Ms. Espinoza, what's shown on this slide?
So this is that account, the Soroka Chase 5601 account. On the top left, it's showing the same ending balance of $324 million, approximately, on June 2nd. And then this is showing the outgoing transactions on June 3rd. So the three red highlights are transfers to a checking account ending in 2038. So there's one transaction for $100 million, another for $20 million, and another for $5 million.
Mr. Ferguson said, and thank you, Ms. Loftus. So Ms. Espinoza, focusing you on the 2038 there, what does the 2038 mean?
Those are the last four digits of a bank account.
And are you able to tell whether that bank account was also at Chase or at another bank?
It's at Chase.
And approximately how much in total was transferred to that account on June 3rd?
$125 million.
Okay. I want to focus on those transactions. Mr. Ferguson said, and Ms. Loftus, if we could go to the next slide, please. All right. So what new information is on this slide, Ms. Espinoza?
So this is adding that 2038 Chase bank account. Looking at the bank records for that account. The account title is Soroka Media Group Incorporated D/B/A Himalaya dollar, and the account was opened on June 3, 2020. Which is the date of the transfers. So as of that date, the beginning balance was $0.
So both of these accounts are in the name of Soroka Media Group D/B/A Himalaya dollar, right?
Yes, they are.
All right. And they're both at the same bank, correct?
Yes. Please.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, go to the next page. All right. Now what's shown on this page, Ms. Espinoza?
This is the Chase Soroka account ending in 2038. This is the signature card for that account.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could just blow up the, top 2/3, make it a little easier to read. Now what was the date of the $125 million in transfers to this account that we were looking at?
June 3, 2020.
And what date was this account opened?
June 3, 2020.
And who is the signatory on this account?
Yanping Wang.
And what was her title?
President.
What date did she sign this?
June 3, 2020.
All the same date.
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Now, Ms. Espinoza, you testified there were 3 transfers on this date, correct?
Yes.
What's shown on this slide?
This is the first transfer, so it was $100 million, $20 million, and $5 million. So this is the first transfer of $100 million, which occurred at 3:17 p.m. on June 3, 2020.
And this is the first transfer.
I'm sorry?
Chronologically, is this the first transfer?
Yes. Please.
Mr. Ferguson said, okay. Let's go to the next slide. What are we looking at here, Ms. Espinoza?
These are the account details provided by the bank for that $100 million transaction on June 3, 2020.
And let me focus you first on the top left, so the bold text. What's the date and time listed there?
June 3, 2020, 3:17 p.m.
And to the right of that, it says, Transcript. What does it say to the right of that?
Yvette Wong 2018.
Now there's text highlighted in red, correct?
Yes.
And what is that text?
That is a memo, similar to a reference, and it states GTV Private Placement Fund.
Do you know what the GTV private placement is, Ms. Espinoza?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Let's go to the next slide, please, Ms. Loftus. Okay. Now what's shown on this slide, Ms. Espinoza?
So this is what was shown previously. The 100 towards the top. Soroka transfer of $100 million to another Soroka account on June 3, 2020, and then there's $100 million transfer 2 days later, on June 5, 2020. To Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities at Citibank.
And what are the last 4 digits of that Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities bank account?
9,681.
And Ms. Espinoza, I should ask, in the bottom center here. There's a yellow box that lists things like GXJPM119. What does that show?
Those are the government exhibits that I looked at in order to obtain the information on the chart.
All right. Now I should also ask, do you know what Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund is?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Let's go the next slide, please, Ms. Loftus. Okay. What's the new information in this slide, Ms. Espinoza?
It's showing the 3 transfers between Soroka. So there was one for $100 million at 3:17 p.m., another for $20 million at 3:18 p.m., and then another for $5 million at 4:06 p.m., all on June 3, 2020.
Mr. Ferguson said, and Ms. Loftus, if we could, maybe we can blow up the top right box. Okay. So $125 million goes to this account on June 3 from the box on the left, right?
Right. Correct.
Why is the balance $138,200,000?
There is an additional amount that came from another account.
And there's an asterisk here, right?
Yes, and there's?
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we zoom out. And maybe we can blow up the yellow box down there. And could you please read the asterisk?
On June 3, 2020. Soroka Media Group JPMC account ending in 8656 transferred $13.2 million to Soroka Media Group JPMC account ending in 2038.
So another Soroka account transferred money to the 2038 account?
Yes.
And it was about $13 million?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, let's go to the next slide, please. All right. Now what's new on this slide?
This slide just totals those 3 transactions. So it shows $125 million at the top between the 2 Soroka accounts.
Mr. Ferguson said, and Ms. Loftus, let's go to the next page, please. And what's new here, Ms. Espinoza?
So on June 3, 2020, there's also a $200 million transfer between Soroka Media Group, the Chase account ending in 5601. $200 million that's transferred at 6:12 p.m. on June 3, 2020 to GTV Media Group Incorporated D/B/A7 coin at Citibank.
Now this D/B/A7 coin, do you know what 7 coin is?
I do not.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. So could we please go to the next slide, Ms. Loftus? What's new here, Ms. Espinoza?
There's an additional transfer from the Soroka Media Group Chase account ending in 2038 for $38 million on June 9, 2020. To GTV Media Group Incorporated D/B/A7 coin.
All right. So of the money that went into these 2 Soroka accounts, approximately how much went to GTV Media Group Incorporated?
$238 million.
Where did the remaining $100 million go?
Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities.
Mr. Ferguson said, may I have a moment, Your Honor?
The court said yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, no further questions. Thank you.
The court said, cross-examination?
Mr. Skirek said, thanks, Your Honor. Cross-examination.
By Mr. Skirek.
Good afternoon, Ms. Espinoza.
Good afternoon.
When did the government lawyers first ask you to testify in this case?
About 2 to 3 weeks ago.
You didn't know anything about the case before the prosecutors reached out to you.
I heard of the name GTV Media, but I don't know any further information other than that.
Okay. But you didn't have any substantive information, you just heard it from somewhere.
Yes.
Okay. Had you ever heard of the name Miles Guo before the government reached out to you?
I heard of that name as well.
But again, just because you had heard it from office talk, right, you didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him.
You weren't part of the FBI's investigative team in this matter.
Just for the testimony I gave today.
But the investigative team.
No, I'm not.
And you weren't part of the prosecution team.
No.
And you didn't investigate any of the money transfers that you just testified to a moment ago. Putting the emphasis on investigation. Did you investigate any of those transfers that you testified to?
No, I didn't investigate.
In fact, you haven't really had any involvement in this case, I believe, as you testified to on direct. Apart from prepping for your testimony here today and then giving testimony, is that right?
That's correct.
So really the only thing that you know about this case is what the government has told you, right?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
It's not what was told to me. I actually reviewed a lot of bank records in order to perform the analysis.
Fair enough. So the only thing that you know about this case is what the government has told you or told you to read. Is that correct?
Well, what the government has provided to me, but yes.
Fair enough. So the only things that you know are what the government has told you or provided to you.
Yes.
Have you met with the prosecutors before today?
I have.
How many times?
It was 2 phone calls and 1 in-person meeting.
Okay. And do you remember when the first time was?
Approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Okay. So it's fair to say that you've been involved in this case for no more than 2 to 3 weeks.
Correct.
And you're trained as a forensic accountant, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And where did you go to school?
Queens College.
And then did you work somewhere before you joined the FBI?
I did.
And where was that?
I worked at the New York State Attorney General's office and I worked for a company called RGL Forensics.
Mr. Skirrick said, okay. All right. If we could please pull up Government Exhibit C1. And you just testified to this chart a moment ago when you were talking to Mr. Ferguson, right?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me who created the first draft of this chart?
So there were various versions of the exhibits. I was given version 5. I know the FBI agents and other forensic accountant. The prosecutors worked together in putting some of these together.
Okay. So the first version of this document was put together by someone other than you. Correct?
Correct.
And it sounds like perhaps the first 5 versions of this document were put together by someone other than you. Correct?
Correct.
And it sounds like there were multiple members of the government team, including lawyers, who helped put it together before you reviewed this document. Is that correct, to your understanding?
Before I reviewed it, yes.
And perhaps multiple other agents who contributed to the first 5 drafts of this before you saw it. To your understanding?
Before I saw the original, I just want to make that clear, and not the final version, yes.
Understood. Before you saw any draft of this document, multiple other people had input to it before it was presented to you, correct?
Correct.
And after you were presented with the first draft, you and the government lawyers talked about this exhibit, right?
I'm sorry. Me and who?
The folks sitting here at counsel's table for the government.
No. Actually, I spoke with the agents and another forensic accountant about it.
Okay. So you spoke to other agents and another forensic accountant for the FBI before you spoke to government lawyers?
Correct.
Okay. Did a time come when you spoke to the government lawyers about this chart?
Yes.
Okay. And when was that?
Last Saturday.
Okay. And did they make suggested revisions to the chart when you spoke to them?
No, I actually made suggested revisions to the charts.
Okay. So, understood. Is it fair to say that the chart was created and mostly completed before you had an opportunity to comment to it?
It was mostly completed and then I made edits to it.
Right. But your edits were relatively small in relation to the work that had been done before it was presented to you, right?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I don't know. I feel like it's relative. They were important to me, the changes that I made. I changed an account number, changed some amounts, so.
Understood. You didn't go into PowerPoint and create this document, though, right?
I went into PowerPoint and edited the document.
And edited it, right?
Correct.
It was presented to you as mostly complete, as you said before, by the time you got to it.
Yes, a different version.
Fair enough. I'd like to just talk briefly about the chart and some of the information underlying the chart. Is it fair to say that the chart focuses on a period of time April through June of 2020?
April through June 3rd, well, June 9th, 2020.
Fair enough. I was going to just use the months for ease. So April to June 2020.
Sure.
Roughly. Okay. And you testified that you reviewed the underlying bank records for your testimony here today.
Yes.
And you reviewed the underlying bank records that are cited, as Mr. Ferguson pointed out. In the summary chart?
Yes.
Okay. And did you review any Soroka bank records from J.P. Morgan that predated April 2020?
No.
And did you review any J.P. Morgan bank records for Soroka that postdated June 2020?
I don't believe so. I think it ended at June.
Okay. So you have no idea, right? Whether the bank account at J.P. Morgan held by Soroka held substantial funds either before or after the time period that you focused on. Right.
Yeah, I just knew the beginning balance as of April.
Okay. Apart from the Chase accounts that you looked at in connection with helping to edit this chart, how many bank accounts did Soroka have in the United States?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Apart from the bank accounts that you looked at in connection with helping to edit this chart, do you know how many other bank accounts Soroka had in the United States?
No. I only focused on the Chase accounts that I reviewed.
Okay. And what about foreign bank accounts? Didn't look at any foreign bank accounts for Soroka. Correct?
I was not provided with that, no.
Okay. So at bottom, no information other than the information you were provided with by the government is reflected in this chart, right?
Correct.
All right. Let's just go back to the chart briefly. I'd like to just take you through it and review a few of the slides, if that's all right. Overall, is it fair to say that we're talking about, this chart, that is talking about money that came into Soroka from the sale of GTV shares?
I do not know. This is money that came into Soroka. I'm just showing the incoming money and the outgoing money.
Okay. So you don't know that Soroka sold shares that it held in GTV and that after selling that a portion of?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
You testified on direct about a private placement, is that right?
That was.
About your knowledge of a private placement.
That was one of the memos on the checks.
Okay. Do you know when the private placement began?
I don't know anything about a private placement.
All right. Let's just walk through the chart. I'm going to first just focus on the first 9 pages of Government Exhibit C1, which should be in front of everyone. If we look at page 1, is it fair to say that this just shows the opening balance of this first JP Morgan account on April 1, 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 2, this just shows who has signature authority for that account.
Yes.
And it looks like that signature authority was updated in May of 2020.
Yes.
And focusing on the Mr. Skirek said, yeah, if you could just blow that back up. Thank you. And also blow up the same line on the left-hand side of the screen. The left-hand signature card. Thank you. And can you see here that, as you covered on direct, it's the same individual is listed as the signatory to this account, right?
Yes.
Yanping Wang.
Yes.
And it looks here as though she's just changed positions at the company, right?
Yeah, it's a different title.
So does that sort of explain why she might have updated the signature card?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
Do you have any understanding as to why one might update a signature card on a bank account?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
Okay. And if we turn to page 3, this is just the same as page 1, right? No difference.
Correct.
So it's sort of a dupe, right?
I'm sorry?
So it's a dupe, it's duplicative, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then turning to pages 4, 5, and 6, first of all, take page 4, on this slide. It just shows how much money came into this bank account in April 2020. That's it, really.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Well, there's a lot of details here, but yeah. It shows the 32 approximate million that came in April.
Right. Overall, that's what it's here for. It's intended to show how much came in April. Right.
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 5, this is just a little bit more detail on the same thing, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 6, this just shows the balance at the end of April, right?
It does.
Okay. Now let's take pages 7, 8, and 9. Pages 7, 8, and 9 are really just the same thing that we've looked at for pages 4, 5, and 6, but this time it's for May of 2020, right?
Right.
Okay. So is it fair to say that pages 1 through 9 of this 19-page chart just show money coming into Soraka's JP Morgan accounts?
Mr. Ferguson said, object to form.
The court said, it's overruled. You can answer.
Yeah, I mean, it shows all the deposits that came into the account. It's very simplified in that it's showing the incoming money into the account. But there's a lot of detail behind it.
I understand there's more detail in the chart. My question is, don't pages 1 to 9 just show money coming into this account?
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
For April.
The court said, sustained.
All right. Now let's look at pages 10 to 14. Page 10 here is something of a cover sheet that just shows what's detailed in the following pages, is that correct?
Well, it shows the 3 transactions which we are about to go over.
Right. And
the following pages.
Sure. And maybe it would be helpful, I'm sorry. We should have just scrolled forward for you so you could see what was coming up next. Mr. Skirek said, maybe go one more. And one more. Did you have an opportunity to look at that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some additional information there, like the signature card, but yeah. It is showing there's $100 million transfer, which is one of the 3 transfers.
Right. Okay. Mr. Skirek said, so if we go back up to page 10. So this, I'm sorry. Let's move now to page 11. So this shows the opening of a new account at Chase by Soraka, is that right?
Yes, the box to the right shows that.
And it's in the exact same name as the other account, is that right?
Yes.
Soraka Media Group Incorporated D/B/A Himalaya $, right?
Yes.
Mr. Skirek said, okay. Let's flip to page 12. Now page 12 just shows who has signature authority for this new Chase account, right?
Yes, it does.
And it's the same person who had signatory authority for the first Chase accounts, right?
Yes, it is.
And in fact, reflects the same title for Ms. Wang as the most updated signature card for the first account, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. We can go back to page 2 if you want. But do you recall that?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now let's just focus a little bit on what happened on June 3rd. Mr. Skirek said, if we can go back to page 10. So I believe you testified on direct that these transactions on June 3rd reflected outgoing transfers. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Aren't these just online transfers from one account at JP Morgan to another account at JP Morgan?
Yeah, those 3 that are highlighted are online transfers to another checking.
Right. So it's just moving money from one of Soraka's accounts and working it into another one of Soraka's accounts within JP Morgan. Correct?
That's correct.
And so there's nothing going out of the bank, right?
Not at that point yet, but eventually, yes.
Fair enough. This is the one we're focusing on now. These 3 transactions. Nothing going out of the bank, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, because they are coming out of the 5601 to go to the 2038 account.
Understood. My question is, there are no transfers leaving JP Morgan Chase, right?
The overall bank?
Correct.
No.
Okay. These are purely internal transfers within JP Morgan, correct?
Yes.
Isn't this the same thing as when I go into my online account to move funds from a savings account to a checking account?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Yes. It's a transfer.
Right. It's the same thing, right?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, overruled.
Okay. So these are sister accounts within the same bank, held by the same company.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the characterization.
The court said, overruled.
They are the same bank account names at the same bank with different account numbers.
Okay. So these 3 transactions we're looking at on slide 10 don't reflect wire transfers, right?
I mean, it's a transfer.
You're aware of the difference between a transfer and a wire transfer, correct?
Yeah.
A wire transfer, am I right, is an outbound transaction from a bank outside of the bank.
Yes, but these are still transfers in between the accounts.
So if I was unclear, my question is, these are not wire transfers. The 3 transactions we're looking on slide 10 that are highlighted.
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirek said, I'm not sure I got an answer to that question, Your Honor. Are these ACH transfers?
These are online transfers.
So is that no, they're not ACH transfers?
That is how JP Morgan Chase characterizes them, as online transfers.
Mr. Skirek said, okay. Can we please pull up Government Exhibit JPM 119? At 48. And if we could please just zoom in on the top of the document, the transfers that are, yup, there we go. If you just move it up a little bit, please, to highlight the, thank you.
By Mr. Skirek.
So can you see this document?
Yes.
And doesn't this reflect, I'm sorry? Withdrawn. Is this document among the documents that are the source for the information that's in the chart?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And these are among the documents that you looked at as part of editing the chart?
Yes.
Okay. And you can see here that all 3 transfers are characterized as online transfer to checking?
Yes.
Okay. Does that make it clear to you that these are purely internal transfers within JP Morgan?
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirek said, okay. If we could go back to the summary chart. Page 14, please. So this particular slide shows some additional detail on that internal transfer at Chase, correct?
Correct.
And you testified to that on direct, right?
Yes.
And again, in this internal transfer. What's written in the memo section when this money gets zapped from one account to another?
GTV Private Placement Fund.
Right. Do you agree with me that that's an accurate description of the funds, or you don't know?
An accurate description? That is the description provided by the bank. And the bank records are accurate, to my knowledge.
Okay. So you don't have any reason to believe that this was an inaccurate description of the funds that were transferred internally at JP Morgan?
No.
Okay. So the transfer is made from one account at JP Morgan to another account. The source of the funds is totally transparent as between those two accounts, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, there can't be any question. When money is moved purely from one account at a bank to another account at a bank, where the money came from, right?
Yeah, no, it says which account it came from and which account it went to. If that's what you're stating.
So the source of the funds is transparent, right?
It's in the details, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And the nature of the funds is described in this memo line that we're looking at on page 14 of this document, right?
I don't know about the nature of the funds. That is the memo that is inputted by the person that made the transfer.
So if we look at the balance of the chart beginning with page 15, would you agree with me that the remaining pages of the chart show what actual money flows out of Soraka's bank account?
Yes, the remaining charts show outgoing money.
Okay.
From Soraka.
I'm sorry.
From Soraka.
Thank you. And would you agree with me that there are two main flows of money out of Soraka's bank account?
There are two entities that received the money. But there are several, it consists of several transactions.
So my question is, are there two principal flows in two directions of the money?
Well, the flows would be the arrows to me, and so there is 1, 2, 3, there's like 4 arrows and the end chart.
Is it fair to say that between June 3rd and June 9th, $238 million from Soraka are moved to GTV Media Group?
Could you go through the last exhibit, the last slide?
Sure.
And could you repeat the question?
Sure. Is it fair to say that between June 3rd and June 9th, $238 million go from Soraka to GTV Media Group?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is it also true that on June 5th, there is a flow of funds from Soraka to Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities Fund, right?
Yes.
And that's in the amount of $100 million, right?
Yes.
Okay. And when the money that leaves JP Morgan and goes to Heyman, that money comes from an account at JP Morgan that is titled identically to the first account at JP Morgan, right?
Yes, they're both Soraka accounts.
Okay. And the account signatory on this account, Ms. Wang, is exactly the same as on the first account.
Of the Soraka account, yes.
So no less information is available to Heyman in this transfer than if the funds had simply come from the first account. Right.
Mr. Ferguson said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, sustained.
Ms. Espinoza, nothing about the funds coming from the second account at JP Morgan concealed anything. Is that right?
Mr. Ferguson said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, sustained.
Does this flow of funds obscure the source of funds in any way?
Mr. Ferguson said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, if I could just have a moment.
The court said yes.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, may I approach?
The court said yes.
Mr. Skirek said, Oh, no, I meant just approach the witness, Your Honor, not a sidebar. Your Honor. It turns out we need a sidebar.
The court said okay.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, I would like to mark this as Defense Summary Exhibit 1. And we would show it to the witness as our only summary chart of the flow of funds that essentially summarizes what's in our summary chart. And the government objects.
The court said, objects?
Mr. Skirek said, yes.
The court said, how come?
Mr. Ferguson said, they didn't. This was the first we heard they were marking it as an exhibit. They wanted to show it to her and ask her if it's accurate. There's no failure of recollection. It's not being used to refresh. If they're trying to offer it as a summary exhibit, I guess they can ask her if it's accurate, but we'll see what she says. If she says this is accurate, then they can seek to offer it, I guess.
Mr. Skirek said, "That's my point, Your Honor."
The court said, all right. So on that prior issue of hypotheticals to Ms. Schottenheimer, if the prosecution plans to ask, say for example Mr. Bass or some other witness in this category this type of hypothetical, I'd like you to provide me with the authority.
Mr. Finkel said, "Understood. Thank you, Your Honor."
The court said, okay.
In open court,
Mr. Skirek said, "May I approach the witness, Your Honor?"
The court said, you may.
Mr. Skirek said, "I'm handing the witness a copy of what's been marked as Defense Summary Exhibit 1.
by Mr. Skirek.
Just take a moment to review that. Ms. Espinoza, have you had an opportunity to review what's been marked as Defense Summary Exhibit Number 1?
Yes.
Does this describe the flow of funds that is also described in the summary exhibit that the government asked you about on direct?
Well, it removes some of the flow of funds and some of the transfers.
Well, it certainly removes some of the detail, correct?
Yes, it does.
Would you agree for me that the net effect of the transfers is the same in this exhibit as in the exhibit that the government introduced?
The outgoing totals, I don't know about net effect. But the outgoing totals to GTV Media and to Heyman are the same amounts.
Okay. That's a better formulation, so I will adopt your formulation. Are the outgoing totals, the net amounts that go to Heyman and GTV, correct in this exhibit?
Yes. The outgoing amounts are the same amounts.
Mr. Skirek said, okay. Your Honor, the defense offers this exhibit into evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor, may I have voir dire for a moment?
The court said, you may. Voir dire examination.
By Mr. Ferguson.
Ms. Espinoza, is that summary chart an accurate summary of the final summary of GXZ1? The summary chart you testified to?
No, it's taking out a lot of the details and some of the transfers.
Mr. Ferguson said, the government objects, Your Honor.
The court said, so are you seeking to admit it for the limited purpose that the witness has stated?
Mr. Skirek said, correct, Your Honor. We're not offering it, clearly it doesn't have the detail that the government's exhibit has. But the witness has testified that the net amount of the flows in the exhibit that we've offered is correct.
Mr. Ferguson said, we object. Because the witness just testified it's not an accurate summary of the summary that's in evidence, Your Honor.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, my summary doesn't need to be an accurate version of their summary. I'm allowed to have my own summary. The defense can have its own summary.
The court said, so is your question whether or not this chart shows the net outflow? Is that the question?
Mr. Skirek said, correct. The witness has testified that the amount of outflows from the J.P. Morgan account to Heyman on one hand and to GTV on the other hand are correct. Are accurate in that exhibit, and we offer it for that purpose.
The court said, all righty. It is admitted then.
Mr. Skirek said, thank you, Your Honor.
Defendant's Exhibit Summary 1 received in evidence.
Mr. Skirek said, we have only, because we just handwrote that, we have only one copy. We will provide additional copies to the court. Can we publish it?
The court said, it's 244.
Mr. Skirek said, thank you, Your Honor. We're finishing up momentarily.
By Mr. Skirek.
So Ms. Espinoza, does this chart, again, does this accurately summarize the flow of funds at issue in the chart that the government introduced?
It shows the correct amounts that went to GTV Media and to Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities. But again, it leaves out a lot of the details about the transactions.
Understood. But this is really pretty simple, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained. She's answered the question.
Mr. Skirek said, thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Mr. Ferguson said, I have 2 questions, Your Honor.
The court said, all righty.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, can we put up GXZ1? GXZ1 at 19, please.
Redirect examination. By Mr. Ferguson.
Ms. Espinoza. Is there more information on this chart than the handwritten one the defense just showed you?
Yes.
Is this chart accurate?
Yes.
Does it have all the relevant information?
Yes, it does.
You were also asked a question about how the $100 million transfer from Soraka to another Soraka account had the memo line GTV Private Placement Fund. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Focusing you on the $100 million transfer from Soraka to Heyman Hong Kong Opportunities. Did you review any records that showed a memo line of GTV Private Placement Fund?
Mr. Skirik said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I don't recall the wire details for that transaction.
Mr. Ferguson said, nothing further, Your Honor.
The court said, all righty. Let me. Recross?
Mr. Skirik said, briefly, Your Honor. Recross-examination.
By Mr. Skirik.
You just testified, Ms. Espinoza, that you didn't review any wire details for that internal J.P. Morgan transfer, correct?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, Your Honor, mischaracterizing.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirik said, I believe she used the word wire, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained.
Was the internal transfer at J.P. Morgan a wire?
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirik said, no further questions, Your Honor.
The court said, all righty. Nothing further.
Mr. Ferguson said, correct.
Witness excused.
The court said, members of the jury, it's 2:46. Time to go. I just want to remind you that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves, or with anyone else. You can't permit anyone to discuss the case in your presence. In addition, you're not allowed to research anything about the case. It's very tempting, now that you've heard some witness testimony, to want to go to Google or the library or any other source to do some research. You cannot research anything related to the case, and you cannot listen to any media reports about the case from any source. Have a good weekend. I look forward to welcoming you back on Monday, promptly at 9:30.
The law clerk said, jury exiting.
Jury not present.
The court said, you may be seated. Is there anything before we reconvene on Monday?
Mr. Ferguson said, not from the government, Your Honor.
Ms. Shrofa said, no, Your Honor, not for the defense. Thank you.
The court said, have a good weekend.
Adjourned to June 3, 2024, at 9 a.m.